Aston Martin released powerful statement and Liberty Media set for another huge purchase from the home of RacingNews365.com. My name is Nick Golding and I'm joined as always by lead editor Ian Parks for a special midweek F1 update. Ian, slightly different surroundings.
Look at us, we're in Eindhoven. That's where Racing News 365 is based, for those of you who do not know. It's been up and going now for a good few years. .com, just a few years less, it's only 3 years old, but we are here meeting all the boys and girls of Racing News 365.nl. We've had a great week here in Eindhoven, getting to know everyone, them getting to know us as well. So it's been really good, pleasurable week. And here Nick and I doing a little special update because we thought, why not make a use of the fantastic facilities that they have here and to bring you something a little bit different, and not from our offices or our rooms back in our homes back in the UK, but actually from live in Eindhoven. So great to be here. And as you say, Alonso, what a talking point from the weekend. Let's dive into that first of all.
Well, of course, the big talking point from the weekend was Fernando Alonso being slapped with a 20-second time penalty for the penultimate lap incident with George Russell, which ended up actually with Russell's car coming to a rest in the middle of the circuit on its side in what was a pretty scary accident. Of course, it shook up the British driver quite clearly. Now, Aston Martin, obviously, team principal Mike Crack released a statement earlier in the week revealing that the team are not appealing the penalty, which obviously dropped Alonso from 6th to 8th. It was actually quite a powerful statement, where there were some quite big things said in defence of the two-time world champion.
It was quite remarkable, actually, I thought, for Aston Martin to come out with what, as you have just pointed out, was a really strong, powerful statement in defence of Fernando. Mike Crack quite clearly felt that the 20-second penalty for an incident where there was no contact was unjust. He described it as a bitter pill to swallow, but basically that they had to accept the decision because although Aston Martin made their best case when they went in front of the stewards at the Australian Grand Prix, but without new evidence, they were unable to request a right of review. They described Fernando as a phenomenal racer, someone who is using every tool in his toolbox. This is a guy that's got 20 years of experience, and obviously he was doing everything he could to finish ahead of George Russell in that Grand Prix. We know from the steward's statement that he braked 100 metres earlier than he had done on many of the previous laps. Obviously, he dabbed on the brakes, he then got back on the accelerator, and then naturally he braked again going into the corner. They felt there was no brake testing. The stewards, as we know, felt that the incident was quite provocative in many respects, that because of what Fernando did, this is what they felt led to, in their estimation, or their judgment, sorry, not estimation, their judgment was a correct 20-second time penalty. Mike Crack again in that statement said, this is the art of motorsport at the highest level, and that Fernando would never put anyone in harm's way. That's correct. He didn't effectively put anyone in harm's way, but as we quite rightly saw, or as we saw, George effectively got into the dirty air of Fernando with that touch of the brakes at 100 metres earlier than had previously taken place. And yes, whilst Fernando very quickly was back on the power, it ultimately resulted in what was a quite significant incident. One that, okay, it didn't put George or anyone in harm's way, but basically it was left George in a very scary position. Even James Allison has come out in the Mercedes debrief and said that that was quite a nerve-wracking position for George. As we heard over the radio, George's screams shouting, "Red flag, red flag, red flag." It was a scary position for him. And whilst, the situation at the time was dealt with the double wave yellows, which forces drivers to slow down immediately, and the virtual safety car, it was still nerve-wracking for George. And as James Allison described, it was an ugly few seconds for him, quote unquote. And while George got over it very, very quickly, you can only imagine what was going through his mind in that car, on his side, in the middle of a racetrack. So yes, whilst Fernando didn't put anyone in harm's way, my God, it was one of those incidents where, but for the grace of God, that no one was following immediately behind, because that was the only saving grace. You've got to think, if there had been someone directly behind George, just a few seconds down the road, who knows what might have happened. Instead, the following driver was a good way back. So obviously that allowed the double wave yellows and the VSC to take effect. Amazing situation for me that Aston Martin decided to come out with this might crack statement. Quite remarkable in many respects, Nick.
Well, of course, it was the third big incident at Turn 6 in the last 2 seasons, since obviously the reprofiling of the circuit. And we actually discussed, the safety of that corner in our podcast on Monday. So make sure you go and check that out. Do you think this is set a precedent for future incidents of this nature?
It could well be that maybe the people in charge at Melbourne's Albert Park now take a look at Turn 6, because as you've mentioned, this is not the first time. Alex Albon, a couple of incidents, as we've seen over the past couple of seasons now, since the reprofiling of the circuit. So it could be that the FIA, we know they're hot on safety. We know they want to ensure that every single circuit is as safe as it possibly can be. So potentially this is one of those that could now be reviewed going into next year's event in Melbourne.
And obviously, the faster a circuit becomes, the more dangerous, as well. Going on to the next talking point, because F1 owners of Liberty Media are on the verge, it seems, according to the Financial Times, of another big purchase. It looks like they're going to be purchasing MotoGP for $4 billion. I mean, Liberty are taking over the world of motorsport.
And can you blame them? In many respects, they've made such a success of Formula One at the end of the day. When they purchased Formula One in January 2017, I believe it was for $4.5 billion. It's now estimated the series is worth $17 billion. So what an increase in the space of just over 6 years. So Dorna, the current owners of MotoGP, must be thinking, this has only got to be good for us. If Liberty Media can do something similar with MotoGP as they have done with F1, what a coup for them. And it appears as well from the Financial Times report that it's not just going to be MotoGP that they'll be taking over, but Dorna's other series, because they also run superbikes as well. So a remarkable coup if it does happen. Not quite over the line yet. The one caveat, the one potential fly in the ointment of this is that we're going back a few years now, when CVC Capital Partners ran both MotoGP and Formula One, they were ultimately forced by the European Union to drop MotoGP because it was deemed that in taking over both series, that the commercial rights would therefore soar. And in doing so, that would lead to price rises for viewership. And they didn't want that. They wanted to be the viewers to at least be capped at a certain level to ensure that they could afford to watch the series concerned. So we've still got to wait on that just a little bit, but it does look like it's definitely going to get over the line, and there will be an official announcement sometime soon, pending European Union review.
Should it be successful and they do purchase MotoGP, do you think they will try to follow a similar business plan to how they have made F1 into, what it is today, the $17 billion company?
Yeah. Why wouldn't they? If you've had success with one particular series, as mentioned there, given its estimated value now of F1, pretty much 400% increase when you think about it in 6 years.
Just a little bit.
That is absolutely phenomenal in any business. So to do what they've done with Formula One, let's go down the same route. Let's follow that business model. Maybe they will have learned something over these past 6 years with Formula One that then can now apply to MotoGP and increase its growth even quicker. You know, we know it was slow off the ground a little bit, Liberty Media, but that was because they had to see what was going to work, what was not going to work. I mean, one of the biggest things that Liberty Media has managed to do that Bernie Ecclestone, the former owner of F1, could not find a way to do was to monetize and make use of social media. Bernie always thought that social media was never going to be a success for Formula One. Well, he's been proven considerably wrong, bearing in mind what Liberty Media has done with F1 over these past few years. Significant rights deals as well with TV as well. Just, as I say, a staggering success story for Formula One, and it's only going to continue. The one caveat we've seen with F1 is the current dominance of Max and Red Bull. Is that slowing down Formula One's progress? That's only going to be revealed, I think, when we see the quarterly results over the coming year for Liberty Media. From what we can see so far, no, the progress isn't slowing, but it might just start to take a little bit of a hold now and just slow it down a little bit.
Do you think if Liberty do get MotoGP, this is a positive or a negative for Formula One?
In what respect, Nick? What are your thoughts there?
I'm just thinking, Liberty have put so much into F1 in terms of effort to grow the sport, particularly in America, as we've seen. Now that they're going to want to do the same in MotoGP, do you think they might take one eye off F1 potentially, given that they've already taken F1 from there to there, whereas MotoGP currently is down here and they need to try and do the same? Do you think this actually could, as you mentioned, actually impact the future growth of F1 potentially?
Yeah, I understand now. That one eye off the ball scenario, it is possible, but I very much doubt it. This is a company that once it gets behind something, it throws its full weight behind that something. It's done the same with the Atlanta Braves, one of its American sports franchises. Yes. It's clearly done the same with Formula One, and I very much doubt there would be any lessening of its business model, of its push to make MotoGP bigger and better than it currently is. We know MotoGP is a major platform, and I have no doubt that given what Liberty Media has done with Formula One, that it will be able to replicate that success with MotoGP as well.
Well, it's the pinnacle of two-wheeled motorsport. For those watching, actually, it's quite an interesting point to comment below. What do you think about Liberty Media potentially purchasing MotoGP? Is this good for F1? Is it good for MotoGP? Or is it a negative? Please let us know your thoughts. Ian, final talking point, because next weekend is the Japanese Grand Prix. And there's already been some news. Daniel Ricciardo will miss FP1 as RB are going to be using Ayumu Iwasa, their junior driver, currently competing in Super Formula. Previously, obviously, was in Formula 2. Given the pressure Ricciardo is already under, given his poor start to the season, and obviously some of the rumours that have come out as well. Obviously, they are just rumours as far as we are aware. Of course, the teams do need to use a rookie into FP1 sessions across the season, but given the current circumstances that Ricciardo finds himself in, is this already shown that perhaps next weekend is going to be a tough one for Daniel?
I would love to know how far in advance this decision was taken to bring in Iwasa for Daniel for FP1. In one respect, you can understand it, because obviously Iwasa will have considerable experience of the Suzuka circuit.
And home support.
And home support as well. So that will be quite considerable. It's one of those that Suzuka, as we know, is a very difficult circuit to master, to get a hold of. So to throw a rookie into FP1 for that track, I don't think many other teams would have ever considered it. But given Red Bull does have Iwasa as one of its juniors in its stable, then, as I say, you can kind of understand it to a certain degree. For Daniel, it's not the start to the Japanese Grand Prix weekend he would have wanted, because now it means he's missing a good chunk of that weekend. Okay, yes, he has experience of that circuit himself, but as a man under pressure right now, and he knows it, in going up against Yuki Tsunoda, who knows that track like the back of his hand, grew up at that circuit, again, like Iwasa, will have major home support. It will place him on the back foot. And he's already been on the back foot at all previous 3 Grand Prix so far as we've seen this season. And he's struggled with that. We know he's a confidence driver. And at the moment, Daniel Ricciardo right now is struggling for confidence. We saw what happened when he was low on confidence at McLaren. He couldn't get out of that trough. He really struggled. And at the moment, it appears like he's struggling again with RB. For the sake of himself, for the sake of RB, for the sake of F1, we want a Daniel Ricciardo performing, because he brings so much to F1. We know that. We've seen that over the past few years. So it's going to be a tricky weekend for him, as I say, without that FP1 at a time when, as you say, he's under pressure. Rumours in the New Zealand Herald that he has only got 2 Grand Prix to save himself before potentially he's jettisoned and Liam Lawson comes in. Now, from what I understand, Liam Lawson's manager has turned around and said, we've got no idea where those reports have come from. And it would be quite a major surprise for Daniel to be jettisoned after 5 Grand Prix. Nick de Vries was given 10 Grand Prix, so he had double.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Nick, though, actually, because there was a really interesting stat. Obviously, we ran a piece on where if you look at Nick de Vries' disadvantage to Yuki Tsunoda in the opening 3 races of last season in qualifying compared to Ricciardo's disadvantage over the opening 3 rounds this season to Tsunoda, Ricciardo was actually slower than Nick de Vries was. And also we saw what ultimately happened to de Vries after 10 races following the British Grand Prix. Fascinating stats.
Love a stat. Everyone can hang a stat on anything, can make an article out of it. Of course, why not? We have done, but it has clearly highlighted the difference already, and the pressure, and highlighted as well why Daniel is already under pressure to come out of these first 3 Grand Prix and to be, on average, as you've pointed out, slower than Nick de Vries. Wow. Okay. And that is why we're going into this Japanese Grand Prix now and the following one in China with Daniel, the man in the spotlight, and he's got to produce something. We have discussed this before. This is now where he has to dig deep within himself to haul himself out of this trough, to rediscover his confidence. He's going to have people throwing his arm around him. He's going to have the whole team at RB, trying to dig deep into why it's all of a sudden not working for him. Whereas we know towards the end of last season and in his comeback that it did work for him. So what has happened over the intervening period, over the winter period, is something fundamentally different with that car right now that was compared to the end of last season, where he was looking okay, where he was confident and where he did feel at ease. And he thought, this is going to be a decent winter because I've got a decent car. We know what's coming, but all of a sudden, these first 3 Grand Prix, he's found himself at this low ebb and he's got to haul himself out of this now. It's a big moment in Daniel Ricciardo's F1 career.
And he'll just be hoping that it's either a fully wet weekend from start to finish or a fully dry, because as we know, Suzuka, the weather's unpredictable. Who knows? FP1 could be the only dry session of the weekend apart from the race, and that would just make his situation that much worse. Ian, as always, amazing. I can actually wave and see you, which is very different.
Bit bizarre.
And you've also got a flight to catch, so let's wrap things up. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. We will see you shortly with the next video. Bye.
Take care, folks. Thank you.